Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be doing a book review for the Star Trek novel, Articles of the Federation. The first thing I will say about this book is, if you like The West Wing, you're gonna like this book. I am a huge West Wing fan. I have rewatched The West Wing all the way through, no joke, 20 times. And there are a few episodes that I've easily seen 30 or 40 times. I am a huge West Wing fan. Part of that is that I was a politics major in college, and I love politics in general. And so I'm a big political junkie, and The West Wing was just the perfect show for that. I don't think any other show has gotten even close to capturing my political imagination. But this book is The West Wing, but set in the Star Trek universe. This is still a Star Trek novel, although you wouldn't really know it from the cover. I think this is an atrocious cover. For one, it looks nothing like the other Star Trek novels that were coming out around this period. You know, it has the cover, on the cover you have the next gen crew, you have Picard and Data, and then you have maybe the Enterprise on there, maybe some Borg on there, something like that. No, in this book you just have a woman standing at a desk, you got a flag, you got some people holding another type of flag. If you're a true Star Trek nerd, you're gonna know what that flag is, but if you're just a casual reader who the covers are meant to, the hardcore Star Trek fans probably knows what this book is about anyway. You don't need to sell them on it, but the casual reader probably has no idea. And if I covered up that this was a Star Trek novel, most people wouldn't even know. And I think that was an atrocious marketing decision upon the marketing team, because the book is so good. This book is utterly fantastic and amazing. I read one other book by Keith R.A. DeCandido, the one that immediately preceded this, both that he wrote and also in the timeline, and that book is A Time for War, A Time for Peace, which was the last book in the A Time 2 series. And in that book, he establishes the character of Nan Bako. I think her full name is Nanyeta, and in this book, it's all about Nan Bako and her staff. And when I say her staff, I mean her whole staff, her chief of staff, her deputy chief of staff, her chief speechwriter, and her chief strategist on foreign policy, including Admiral Ross, who's serving as the Starfleet liaison, and her press secretary. And if you've watched the West Wing TV show, you know what each of those roles are and what their job description is. And so Keith spends a little bit of time establishing what each of those jobs are for people who haven't watched The West Wing. So if you've never watched The West Wing, you could still enjoy this book. But if you have watched The West Wing, boy, are there Easter eggs and references for you. One thing that this book does that is absolutely brilliant is it takes specific scenes from The West Wing and uses them in a slightly different way here. If you've never watched The West Wing, it's still a good scene. But oh my goodness, I found myself going, yes, I know what that's from. I know what that means. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. And so I'll give an example. At one point in the book, there is a foreign leader whose child comes down with horrendous disease, and there is only one person who has the ability to save this child, and that is a person in the Federation who is unwilling to do the operation. And Nan Bako calls that person into her office and basically convinces them to do the operation. That is exactly, scene by scene, exactly one of the episodes, specifically the episode titled Swiss Diplomacy from The West Wing. This is how close they got it to that scene. In The West Wing, there's a line that Leo McGarry says. He says, what about I think it's the Chinese or Japanese, surely they'll get it right one of these days. And essentially the same line happens, except they're like, what about the people who have a 10% rating? Certainly they'll be able to do it one day. You know, there are there are so many times where he just is pulling pure West Wing ideas and putting them in the book, which I love. I think that's brilliant. I think it was perfectly done. Except, it would be perfect, except for one area, and that is some of the dialogue amongst President Baco and amongst Jor-El, her press secretary. Now, Baco and Jor-El, overall, I think they're great characters. They're very interesting. It's interesting to listen to some interviews to see who they're based off of. But there are a few times where they each make threats to either in Baco's case, to fellow politicians, or in Jor-El's case, to his own staff. And these are meant to be funny. They're the same way that Josh Lyman's lines in The West Wing are meant to be funny when he's threatening someone. But Star Trek's supposed to be more evolved. Star Trek's supposed to be more elevated. Our characters, specifically, not just in the Federation, but in the upper echelons of the Federation, are meant to be of the type that we're all about peace. And yet, you have Nanyeta Baco at few times literally threatening to take a podium and beat two people to death with the podium. Now, it is a funny scene. It's meant to be funny, and you know she's not actually threatening them in the scene, but it just rubbed me the wrong way when I was reading it. And it's not just that one scene. Both characters, both Jor-El and Baco, say something similar several times, to the point that I thought that he was just trying to emulate Josh Lyman's dialogue, and it just bothered me. And other than that, that was the only, between the marketing of the book with its terrible cover and with also the dialogue in those places, I loved the book, everything else about it. It was superbly done. When this book gets into deep political themes, it asks questions about refugee crises. It asks deep political questions about first contacts and dealing with new people that you've never met before, and diplomacy. It also asks questions about espionage and about state secrets and about the freedom of the press, and should there be a free press, and why is it important to have a free press. It asks all of these difficult, complex questions, and you'd think it would be beating the reader over the head with them because it's literally a political novel, but instead it's more nuanced. It's more it's more playing both sides, and you know which side Keith DeCandido is on because it's fairly obvious, but it's not like if you're on the other side, you are a terrible human being. He plays both sides excellently. And there were some other Star Trek books I read this year that aren't dealing with politics. They're just a Star Trek novel, like a general Enterprise going off on doing its thing novel. And in those books, it feels sometimes more like they're trying to make a point about modern politics to bludgeon you, hit you over the head. But in this book, which is literally a political book, they don't do that. And it shows the deftness of writing that Keith DeCandido has that some authors just don't have. And while I disagree with Keith on a lot of the points he makes in the book, they're very interesting points and they made me think about them. And so I very much appreciated that. Another wonderful aspect of this book is how full it truly is. This could have been a very baseline book. You just put in one political idea and that was it. But there are layers of A plots and B plots and C plots and D plots, and they go throughout the book. There are times where you'll forget about a plot for 100 pages and it'll come back and it's still important and it was referenced earlier and now you're seeing the ramifications of that, and it is just done wonderfully. And I didn't mention this in my Roku Depot review because I didn't have enough time, but one thing I will mention for this book is that Keith DeCandido is able to introduce a new way of exposition, and that is illuminating the City of Light, which is this program that is on the Federation News Service, which is kind of akin to, if you're watching The West Wing, it's Capital Beat. But if you're just a regular American, you'll know this from Meet the Press. That's essentially what this is. It's a Meet the Press analog. But through that group, the Meet the Press, this book takes place over the course of a year, so you see different months, there's different time jumps. And during that time, you see various times where they used the Federation News Service, specifically that program, to show how the politics are happening among the just interiorly, so that you can follow everything, but it also allows you to see people who aren't involved in politics and how they view the politics. The book starts out with this little girl who's doing schoolwork, and her mom turns on this news service, and this excites the girl, and she wants to go into news, and she wants to watch it every day now. And I wouldn't be surprised if this little girl grew up to be a politician in the storyline, or if they had had enough time, she would have. And you see characters who are in the military, or I shouldn't say military, who are in Starfleet. Starfleet's not the military, I have to get that right. Who are in Starfleet, and these Starfleet Academy students, you see their perspective on politics as they watch this news service. And then you get other characters. You see people in a bar on Cestus 3 and how they view Baco, who some of them, they love her, they adore her, they put her on such a high pedestal, and other ones in the same room think that she abandoned their planet to go do bigger things. And you see both of their perspectives as politics are happening on the screen, and Baco herself is not on the screen, but her advisors are, or discussions are happening. Another thing that I wasn't able to put in my Roku Depot review, but I'll include here, there are tons of Easter eggs and references and characters from Star Trek lore. Admiral Janeway pops up for one scene. It's very brief, but it is really cool. Ambassador Spock pops up in this book. He has an excellent role, and it actually ties into Star Trek 2009, I think. I don't think that they knew they were going to tie into this at the time, but it worked out really well. Some other characters whom I won't mention for spoilers' sake also show up later in the book. And it was just so refreshing to see all these characters from all these shows pop up, and it was little cameos. And if it was done another way, it would seem cheap. It would seem, you're just using this character to use this character. No. Candido is able to use the character, but to advance the story, because this was the character that makes the most sense. There was one time where it was like, okay, we need to solve this problem. Who's the one person who could help us solve this problem? And this person comes in, and you're like, oh, of course, that makes total sense. And it just works perfectly. And it's all done so with a political discussion and political focus. And so as I'm describing this, I'm just thinking how impressive this book is for how short it is. It's only 390 pages. This could have been easily a 500 or 600 page book, and I would have read the whole thing. I thought it was brilliant. I was able to read it in one day because we had a snow day and I couldn't leave the house. So that was partially what made me read it all at once. But it is a very fast-paced moving book. It makes you want to read. I have to know what happens next. And it's a political book. There are no fight scenes in this book. There are fights that are talked about, but there are no fight scenes. So there's so much praise I could give this book, so much that I can't divulge because of spoilers. But if you love Star Trek, this is an excellent book. Just be wary knowing it's political based, but I still think it's worth it. If you love politics, specifically The West Wing, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, I would even say this might be a good Star Trek book for you, because you will understand the political sense, and this will introduce you to all the Star Trek terminology and Star Trek universe stuff. So I think this is a wonderful, wonderful novel that I wish more people had read. much more people will read, and I hope that Simon & Schuster, it's no longer under Pocket Books, it's under Gallery Books, but I hope that Simon & Schuster's Gallery Books will be willing to take a swing like this book and take a risk, because this was well worth it for me at least. So I give this book a 9.8 out of 10. A superb, wonderful book that is certainly in my top 10 Star Trek novels, potentially in my top 5, and as I think about it, it is in my top 5 standalone novels. It is pure genius. And that is, this book, I know one book reviewer, I won't say his name, he likes to use the phrase transcends the genre. This book transcends the genre of tie-in fiction in all the best ways. So if you've read this book, let me know how you feel about it. If you haven't read the book, if you have questions, leave them in the comments section down below. Please subscribe to my channel. I have tons of Star Trek videos and other book reviews. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.